Let's talk about the marriage delusion. Before I go into why I think there is a certain deluded sense to the concept of marriage, I would like to talk about marriage. Now, one of the first things that you learn as a social sciences student or a humanities student about marriage, even before you're a graduate student, is that marriage is a social contract. It's a sacred bond. It's a tradition. And many social scientists have been trying to define marriage in the various ways that it functions. So that's what I want to go over, the functionality of marriage. You can divide the functionality of marriage along the course of human history in terms of economic functionality, emotional functionality, and perhaps religion or traditional functionality. And these three are probably the most segregative that I found of, in terms of how I read most of it. Now, the economic functionality is found even today among the tribes and certain families. So when tribes are, and a lot of villages have this as well in rural places, especially in India, they work the fields, and agriculture and rearing is a part of their day-to-day life, which makes their living. Now, one of the ways to have efficient work at the field and on the field, and economically sound status as farmers or as rearers, is to have labor. Now, how do you achieve this? You either employ or you have enough children that could work your field. And so people married early, and let's say you were married at 17, by the time you're 40, your child is 20 and he's an effective laborer at your family business, and you still have more kids on the way, because a lot of tribes in Africa, some tribes in India, they are polyamorous. So they marry, even as they grow older, they marry younger women. So it's like a big family, but it's an effective way of keeping the family economy alive. Now, we see this functionality in modern days as well, and there were ways to become politically superior, let's say, up until the 18th century, 17th century, when Romanticism took over, and we'll go over that. But marriage was a big part of political ties for several kings. They married, and they married their children so that they could have secure family ties among other, let's say, threatening and competitive political powers. And this is on a big scale. Maybe the labor side of it is on a smaller scale. But even in India, you find several rich families that not only want to have an efficient labor to run a big family business, but also want to keep the business in the family. So when the child or your son gets married, he takes over the business and he has a child, then you ensure that the business is kept in the family rather than somebody who's outside of the family. Now, these are various economic functions that are also logical, that are found in several settlements even today, but was a large factor in old days when we were discovering agriculture. So marriage has not always been a ceremonial, traditional, religious affair. I mean, obviously, it was the basis of marriage was the biological idea that a man and a woman can come together and they produce an offspring, which is very obvious. But somewhere along history, tradition and religion intervened and created a framework that was necessary to govern the social fabric at the time, and maybe rightly so. But I read a lot of religious material for this video, and I found the popular religions and the tribal religions and tribal beliefs. But if you really look at the popular religions of the world, and I don't have to really name them, but the popular religions do not talk about the functionality of marriage outside the framework of those religions, outside the doctrine and the various dogmas that are attached to the religions. They attach the rights and the wrongs and the morals and morality of this marriage concept only within the framework of marriage. And that's something that I found very, in fact, conducive to the idea of making a video about the marriage delusion. So maybe religion and tradition have a part to play, but they're ceremonial. And in India, it's a grand affair because this ceremonial aspect of marriage becomes an important factor in what is the marriage. And families come together, and after a while, it just becomes less about the two people marrying and more about the families that are coming together. And that's a communal thing. There's nothing wrong about it. You find it in so many tribes, but tribes continue to stay together. And in India, multiple families don't necessarily stay together. So ceremony just becomes a one-time thing. So that's another factor in the marriage delusion. So now we can truly understand that religion and tradition and all these aspects that intervened the economic function of marriage, the economic aspect of the union between two people, and especially in tribes and other rural settlements where it was a way of keeping the family values in the blood, keeping the business in the blood, having efficient labor. Religion and the belief systems really kept it secure, didn't it? And it was a way of keeping it alive because we are social animals. We believe in unity of strength, and this is something that really accounts for that more than anything. But let's look at the emotional side of marriage, and not the ceremony, but the idea of two people coming together that love each other that results in marriage. Now, this romantic idea has been around for about 500, 600 years, and it has been something of a big part of literature and prose and poems at the time. And so much so that even today's films, cinema, and TV shows are inspired by that. But up until then, there were people that, whether for political reasons, whether for economical reasons, whether for simply biological, personal reasons, had multiple partners. There's so many settlements where there were multiple partners. There were multiple partners at multiple times. And this is something that has been prevalent in our human history. The polyamory and the polygyny and polyandry has been also a big part. Polyandry is also well known in various tribes, even in India, where one woman is actually associated with multiple men. And the emotional side comes from the Romantic era, where you are associated with one person, you love that person, and you're emotionally attached to that person. That comes from the Romantic era, where it was immoral to have multiple partners, unethical, in fact, and evil to do that. Now, maybe there was a religious side to it, religious taboo to it, but it's still, these were particularly colonial times with a lot of political agendas that drove the way the society worked. So you never know, but what it resulted in was a sustained social understanding and mechanism that involved the marriage between a man and a woman, and which is something that you see even today, and which actually also works oppositely. Because let's say emotional attachment is good and you're happy with somebody and you feel secure with somebody, if that person isn't there, it's going to cause damage. So I read a lot of research papers for this video, and I think one of them was something that I found very interesting. It suggested that married people actually experience less morbidity and less effects of heart attack and stress and everything, and which is just plain stupid, because it is trying to suggest that people that are not married essentially face all these issues all the time, and people that are married do not at all face this. So it's a baseless claim, and I think that there's another paper that suggests that marital conflict results in bad health, but it doesn't suggest anything, or it doesn't talk about anything about being unmarried. And so there were multiple papers that basically were conducive to this marriage delusion study that I've been trying to do. And in fact, this whole marriage delusion thing was confirmed rather than refuted by some of these papers that added the health and the emotional aspects to marriage. If they are trying to suggest that having a person or being equipped with a good social circle, good personal social circle, results in good health, I agree with that, because that's something that has been a part of our ancestry. Primates believe in that. It's unity is the strength, unity of group is the strength. And that is true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you need a partner or a sexual partner that will always do that. In many ways, we have evolved from the notion of males and females coming together for reproduction to actually systematically organizing marriage to where it is. And I'm not in critique of the modern understanding of the union between a male and a female. It's not something that this video is about. It's more about marriage as a concept. Is it outdated? Religiously, yes. The religious aspect of it is completely irrelevant. I've read material for this particular video that just completely seems out of this world, and it can never exist in this world. How can it exist? So much of it is in the times where we weren't even wearing robes or something like that. We were completely in a different lifestyle, and now we have technology. Now we have so many advancements, social media. Religious and traditional aspects of marriage are not relevant. So that's one delusion. The emotional side of it certainly is not relevant, because we're talking about mental well-being, we're talking about individualism, independence, we're talking about self-care, what is that? Mindfulness and all those things. And those really suggest a very different reality than the dependency of having another person around who may or may not be a sexual partner. So the emotional thing is out of question. And I'm not just brushing these things off, I'm actually going to go deep into this. So we went over the political and the economic side of the functionality of marriage throughout human history. And obviously the political side is not something that we talk about now. It's just irrelevant to our times, because there's not many monarchies, firstly, and political powers do not necessarily rely on one person's marital status anymore. It's not something that is really indicative of political success or failure. The economic side of it, and we talked about tribes and various village settlements that seek to marry and have offsprings and have kids to take care of labor and go through labor efficiently, can be seen in big family enterprise business as well. You see many rich families marrying other rich families into their family, and kind of coming together to form this kind of business union. And you see this happening a lot, but it's still a very small fraction, because they want to keep the business and the wealth alive in the family. And let's face it, not everybody is rich. And a lot of families, especially in India, in the big cities, they move to the city. They have nuclear arrangements, and so it necessarily does not indicate the social fabric that we see currently. So they are out of the picture. Now, what is the marriage delusion? This is something that the video is about, and we went over these aspects, but what is the marriage delusion? Now, here's an updated definition of marriage. It's a universal institution recognized by custom or law, and which has a procreational aspect. And Malinowski defined it as the contract for maintenance and production of children. So it all dates back to our evolution, really, and we are the ones that actually started paternal care for offsprings. We don't find it in chimpanzees, but the father cares for the child among humans. And that's a big part of our evolution. And that is what these modern definitions are trying to address. But this is what the basis of marriage delusion is, because think about it. A modern sexual relationship between two people results in a child without marriage. People live together. There are live-in relationships, aren't there? And so this is out of the picture. You don't need marriage for procreation. That has been established. In recent times, it has been celebrated and it has been established for many years, but that is the delusion of marriage, that it attempts to be something different from two people coming together in the modern dating environment. That is the delusion of marriage. When two people come together and let's say they start a romantic relationship, they don't necessarily have to put it on paper or be in alignment of some religious tradition. That's outdated. That's way back in history. And that's the delusion. It's the idea that when two people are dating or they're living together, it's something shallower than a traditionally accepted notion of marriage. It's not sacred enough. They must have that rite of passage. So many people, I mean, they live together longer than people that get married. Think about it. This is the world that we live in now. You don't have to get married to live with somebody that long, to be in love with somebody that long. And that is where we are. And that is a sad delusion, because it will either stand the test of time and create total chaos, or it will simply vanish. And divorce rates are increasing throughout the world, and even more in India. And in India, certainly, it's one of the age groups for divorce is high in from 28 to 35. So a lot of young people are actually probably rushing into a marriage rather than actually marrying because they have to marry. And that's another thing. That's another delusion of marriage, because it's to think that modern dating is anything deeper, as deep as traditional or philosophical marriage. I mean, I'm keeping all questions on the table here. I'm not trying to conclude to anything. I'm just trying to go over the notion of marriage delusion. But here's the thing. That is also a modern understanding among people, especially on social media and people that go about dating, that their relationship is deeper than marriage. Let's say the original purpose among the Romans and the Greeks for marriage was to ensure ample time to bear children because there was low life expectancy. Among tribes, it was to increase labor and efficiency of labor. And among royals, it was to keep the status in the blood. All these things are irrelevant for the modern social fabric. We have been modernized. I don't like to think that we have been westernized, but certainly some part of the society has been glamorized by certain ideas that come from a certain part of the world, and social media is a big indicator of that. But like I say, whether it's a social contract or a sacred bond or an institution or a tradition, whatever it is, it's just one thing. It's really our biology. It's a man and a woman coming together to have a kid, and that's it. Whether you call it a marriage, you call it something else, whether they do not have a kid, they don't have a sexual union, it's just everything else is a delusion, because that's the basis of all of this history of these unions. But that's the marriage delusion for you.